freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 335 of Gun Freedom Radio, where we engage, we educate, and we inform. We are brought to you by azfirearmsauctions.com, where you set the price on guns, ammo, and accessories. I am one of your hosts, Cheryl Todd.
And I'm the other guy, Dan Todd. Our theme today is The Next Step, and our guest is Connie Wray. Connie is the host of the Docu-Series The Next Stage and recently partnered with Walk the Talk America for a deeply personal episode. After losing her 25-year-old stepdaughter to suicide in 2018, Connie became active in suicide prevention advocacy. Connie currently hosts a monthly series for crisis support services of Nevada called Talk It Out Tuesdays. The company has been instrumental in helping those who have been struggling with addiction, anxiety, depression, PTSD, and autism. Welcome to the show, Connie.
Hi, welcome. So excited to be with you both. I'm really looking forward to this.
Boy, me too. And again, I have to say, I am sad for the reason that we have been brought together. But I am so grateful to you for revisiting the most difficult moments of your life, to be able to share your journey and it helped to encourage other families out there.
Well, I think that for both my husband and I and our family, it really is about education. And if we can find a way to share our story so it enlightens and engages and gets that information out there to other people, we want people to get help if they need help. And if opening up about what we went through is a way for individuals to feel more secure and reaching out to get that help, then we're absolutely about sharing this story.
Oh, I so value that. Thank you so much. So let's start, because my background's in psychology. Of course, what am I going to say? Let's start at the beginning. Tell us about your journey and your background and your upbringing.
Well, I actually am, I guess you would say I'm a Navy brat. My dad worked civil service, but also served as a CB in the Navy. And when I was in the 6th grade, my dad was working for the government and we moved to the Philippines. He worked for Subic Bay for the Navy base there. And I was there for 7 years. Graduated high school, and the very next day, Mount Pinatubo blew up. So we were evacuated a few short days later on the USS Abraham Lincoln. I'm originally from Seattle, Washington, and after we were evacuated, I moved back to Seattle and started a career, started going to college to follow a career that I'd always wanted to be in, and that was theater and radio and communications. And completed my degree at Cornish College of the Arts in 1995 and moved to Northern Nevada. Never thought that I would end up in Reno, Nevada back in, it was November of 1998. And it was where I got my first radio job. And since then, I've lived here in Northern Nevada for a little over 22 years. And just recently, I left my radio career and started The Next Stage, which is an online docu-series that I partner with the local news station here in Northern Nevada. And we share stories of innovation, ideas, concepts, people who are really looking to move the needle onto the next stage. And I was introduced to Walk the Talk America through an episode that I did for Crisis Support Services. And I guess you could say that a very unusual friendship began. And this is really where our journey started.
Wow. Well, I have to say, Reno, Nevada, we have some good friends who live there. And of course, Jake is one of them now. But Tahoe, you are like a stone's throw
I
from one
know.
of my most favorite places on the planet, Lake
Oh,
Tahoe.
yeah, it is. It's gorgeous. And then I'm very lucky. My husband is originally from Quincy, which is another beautiful mountain town, and his mom lives in Gray Eagle. So if you love mountain lakes or the Great Basin, this is definitely a place to come. And I love every aspect of being here: the mountains, the lakes, the community. It's a really unique community that lives here. And I feel like I've seen some major transformation that has happened over the 22 years that I've been here. I mean, we're a rapidly growing city. Of course, that comes with rapid growing problems and
Of course.
challenges. Uh, but I feel very blessed that we have that moniker, right? Biggest little city. And I 100% tell people all the time that is the joy of living here. There is literally 2 degrees of separation between anyone that you meet in Northern Nevada. We all know each other. We're all there for each other. And I feel so blessed to be a part of this community.
Absolutely. That is awesome. And so when we say Jake and Mike, of course, we are talking about Michael Sodini and Jake Wishkirchen, whose name I butcher every time I say it.
I know it's a tough one. Jake Wiskerson. That's a tough name, but he's a great guy. They're both just it was interesting because when I met them, Mike, of course, is the founder from Walk the Talk America, and then Jake is on the board with him. And Jake is a therapist. He has Zephyr Wellness here in Northern Nevada. And when I first met them, there was something about them. And I know we talk about it now. They were so nervous to interview with me, just as I was as nervous to interview with them. I mean, if you really were to sit down and look at the bare facts, here we were about to talk about suicide and gun ownership, mental health and gun ownership. And they were going to sit down with a mother who had just lost their child to a suicide by firearm, a veteran. My daughter was a Marine Corps vet. So I'm sure that there was, and Jake will say the same. He was like, we were just not sure what was going to happen. But in the end, I think what happened is a true testament to the America I believe we live in. And that is, even if we come from 2 different backgrounds and 2 sides, it's important to meet in the middle so we can better understand one another.
Oh, beautifully said. And I want to take a deep dive into, what did you guys do when you were interviewing together? But again, let's take one a step farther back and talk about your daughter, Katie. You said she was a veteran of the Marine Corps. When did you and your husband realize that maybe she was struggling with something and did you realize it could be life threatening, or did it just seem like, well, she's just not, she's just not herself?
It was very immediate. The background is that my 2 stepdaughters were removed from their biological mother. She was in the midst of methamphetamine addiction. And Katie was my husband's oldest daughter, that he became her father when she was 2 years old. He's not her biological father, but the only father that she knew. So when the girls were removed from their mother, Katie was 14 and her younger sister, Jessie, was 10 years old. And again, I go back to talking about the community that I lived in. Obviously, the girls were removed through Child Protective Services. And we cannot say enough about what incredible individuals work for that agency and the care that we were given. We were immediately put into therapy. Our girls were given an option to get into a therapist. And it was really at that time when Katie was 14 that we knew that there were some mental health issues. She had been diagnosed with a bipolar disorder, a personality disorder, and a lot of it came from what she had grown up around, the environment that she was in. And also, we know that her mother had a mental health illness. I mean, obviously, when you think about drug addiction and mental health, they really do go hand in hand.
Yeah,
So
there's nature and nurture taking place there.
exactly. And, I just fell in love with my husband, and those girls, they just meant the world to me. And, it was a struggle from day one with Katie, because we
Mhm.
knew that she was dealing with a mental health crisis and really struggling to find her way. Um, when she was 18, she left our home, and that was in kind of a midst of her trying to figure herself out and wanting to kind of reconnect with her mom, but then that not being what she had hoped for. Obviously her mom was still struggling, and I think that that really affected her. And when she joined the Marines, we were just so incredibly proud of her. I mean, obviously I come from a military family. My whole family is military, so it was, in my mind, I was really thinking that this would be an opportunity for her to grow and discover who she was,
Yeah.
and kind of get away from what she had always been a part of, and that was this unstable environment, and that she could find her own place is what we had really hoped.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Boy, that is tough. And so do you think that her military experience did help, or did it maybe exacerbate some things? Just, not that any military service would exacerbate someone's issues, but on her particular situation.
I think it was a combination of both. I think that she really was trying to find a place where she belonged. And if you're at all familiar with the military, right, it's a brotherhood. It's something that I think that there were parts of it that she did very much engage with. But we
Sure.
do know that they were very much aware of her mental health issues, and that she did spend some time in a mental health facility in Paris Island. And my husband at that time was in contact with her, her therapist, and we were just really trying to encourage Katie to continue to get the help that she needed. But if you're familiar at all with bipolar disorder, it's extreme highs and extreme lows.
Mhm.
And that was what we saw continuously with Katie, was this riding high for a very long time and then just coming crushingly down low. And a lot of this was exacerbated by decisions that she was making based on emotion,
Sure.
which is part of the illness.
Sure.
So I think that she ended up getting married very young. She was barely 21, barely knew her husband, quite honestly. And he's a wonderful, wonderful man. And he is now in Kansas. He too himself was a Marine. He was stationed at Bridgeport, a mountain warfare training facility, which is not too far from here in Reno. Um, and I think he loved her more than anything on this planet. But when you're dealing with an illness,
Mhm.
it doesn't matter how much you
Mhm.
love someone, they don't see that. And
Yeah.
I'm learning that now.
Yeah.
And I think that is also part of our journey of understanding better about mental health.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. So taking us back to now, you've met Mike Sodini and Jake Wishkirchen of Walk the Talk America, and you are going to, share your interests, the work you do, the work they do. What what came about that you said, okay, I want to overcome this particular hesitation or fear, I'll let you put the word to it, that I have about the tool itself, um, the firearm itself that was part of this tragic story with Katie.
I never really had been, I mean, yes, I was around guns in the sense I lived on a military base. And if you've ever lived overseas, you know that anywhere you go on a military base, there's someone there with a machine gun, or, it wasn't unusual, but I was never personally around guns. My dad did some skeet shooting and had gone out and done some hunting with my uncle, but it was not something that was a part of my world.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband, as I had mentioned, grew up in the mountains. And so this was, he always jokes that where he grew up, he went to high school where everybody had a gun rack in their truck, right? This
That would
was
be Dan.
Yep.
right. It was just like, it was part of the culture. This is where we lived.
Mhm.
And I had already had conversations with him about my fear of guns. And he had been telling me, I think it'd be great for you to take a gun safety class. I think it would be, just to get over that fear. And I think when I met Mike and Jake and the conversation started, Jake's a therapist. So here we are having this interview, and he's really kind of digging into asking me questions about how I felt and why I had this fear and how it had intensified after losing Katie. And I think a lot of it was, and I said this to him, it's easy for me to blame the gun
Mhm.
than to really, even though I understood the illness, in my mind, it was like, well, if the gun wasn't there, right? If the gun hadn't been there, but then I know that it would have been something else.
Mhm.
If you're in that much pain
Sure.
and you're dealing with that much of a mental health struggle, I don't think that it would matter what tool you used.
Mhm. Yes.
And there was also something that Jake said to me that has resonated with me. And that was, he started talking about statistics about gun owners. And he said, prior to the pandemic, we know that I think it was like 46% of Americans owned firearms. They have a firearm in their home. And he said, we also know now that those statistics are higher. You're probably looking at about 50 to 60% of Americans will have a firearm in their home. And he said, in my industry, we're not talking about that. There's no plan. He was one of the rare therapists that was really fighting to have these open conversations. And I thought to myself, wait a minute. That means that if I'm out there sharing our story, but a gun owner doesn't feel comfortable reaching out or having a plan in place,
Mhm.
we're missing 50% of the population in opening up this conversation. And I also believed, because, mentioning my husband's background, when we would see stories about mass shootings or those types of things, we always would say, it sure does seem like had there been better mental health resources, this
Mhm.
wouldn't have happened.
Mm.
And so then I'm in a state, the state of Nevada is ranked 50th in the nation for mental health resources. So
wow.
that was alarming to me. But going back to what Jake said, that we were just missing the boat on having this conversation. And I thought, well, that needs to change.
Mhm. Absolutely. But I have to give you so much credit that you had this tragic incident where Katie took her life with a firearm. You already are, not super like into the whole gun thing and maybe a little averse to the gun thing. And now you're even more so because of what happened with Katie. And then you trusted these two people that you had, just met really in the scope of time in life, just met. You trusted them enough to go out on a firing range to a
Yeah.
shooting range
Yeah.
and have them
And it was
instruct
funny.
you.
We were actually driving out into the middle of nowhere because in Nevada, you can drive up in the hills
Yeah.
and start shooting.
Yeah.
And, my husband was with us, and I think he was really excited for me to do this. But there was something just so incredibly trusting about Jake and Mike. And I loved that Mike's background is that he comes from this family of, gun manufacturers, gun
Mhm.
owners. And
Mhm.
he really saw a need, and that he took it one step further after a conversation with a family member about losing someone to suicide. Because I think we all have that conversation, right? After a mass shooting or you find out someone takes their life with a firearm, we all have that conversation. We got to blame the gun, or it's a mental health, and we're not getting anywhere by blaming each other. But if we could get somewhere where I could take my fears and my experience and say, hey, I can have my mind changed.
Yeah.
And if I'm someone that was as fearful and, that culture so unknown to me, I think that I would be able to open up other people's eyes. Like, they know that I'm not out there with, I'm trying to get the knowledge. And I think
Yeah.
there's something to be said for that.
There's a lot to be said for that. And you are just an individual. You're not an advocate for anything other than to help people, get the help they need on your Talk It Out Tuesdays and your suicide prevention advocacy. But on the firearms issue, you're in a neutral place, and you came from a non-neutral place just emotionally. And so if you're able to say, look, maybe there's a new way to look at this and talk about this and talk to each other about this, that's what I think is just huge. And you're such a beautiful example for so many of us, even those of us who are outspoken advocates like Dan and I, because sometimes I think we get too locked up in, well, it's our rights, it's our rights, it's our rights. Well, great, it's our rights. But how am I actually attaching, am I actually impacting where you came from by saying it's my rights? No. No, I
Right.
need to care
Yeah.
about you and your concerns, and also stand on the point of it's our right. So
I was also just so impressed that, prior to COVID, that Mike is going to gun shows where he's sitting up a Walk the Talk America booth,
yes.
which I'm sure there were some gun owners that are kind of like, oh, why is this mental health advocate here? But when you really think about it, I believe that if you are a gun owner and you are struggling with a mental health crisis, and let's look at the pandemic, we saw people who never had experienced a mental health crisis before. All of a sudden, they're feeling anxious and the world around them is not normal. So they're having these feelings they've never had before. Wouldn't it be better that gun owner knows, hey, I've got a plan. I have a family member or someone who I have this plan if something were to happen, so that I'm keeping myself safe. And then you're also starting the conversation with that other person about mental health. So I kind of saw this like bridge where we could find a way to get gun owners to feel comfortable and say, I am struggling and I need some help. And as Jake would say, he, as a therapist, was dealing with people saying, well, I'm not going to come see a therapist. They're going to take my guns away. And he was like, I don't have a bat phone. I'm not calling up the FBI to come get your guns. Let's actually have a plan so you know how to keep yourself safe. And I just really, really respected that.
I think it's great that he's going to the gun shows. I'm kind of an old timer that, we've been through these family crises. And we had one of my family members attempted suicide 3 times. And there was, the only thing they could do at the time was they put her in a mental hospital, which did no good. All they did was confine her. And so there was nowhere to go. We didn't know what to do. And by getting the community together and talking about it and getting firearm owners to understand situations and signs to recognize that there's a problem is a wonderful thing. And it's something that everybody should invite. And I haven't been talking because I want to hear you. I want to know what you've gone through. And I bless you for the courage that you have to do this. Thank you.
I love that you brought that up, though, that listening and knowing what the signs are. I think that's another big problem that we don't have. That would be, if I were to pick certain things that I would like to see changed, I think in our education system, in our health classes for our kids, We need to be talking about mental health. We need to be talking about suicide prevention. Excuse me. We need to be talking about, hey, what are those signs? Because I know in conversations with Katie's friends afterwards, there were signs. She did say things.
Mm-hmm.
And I am dealing with friends of hers that their husband was a police officer. One of her best friend's husband was a firefighter. One of them was a paramedic. Like, they all have this extreme guilt now that they didn't see. Like, it's all hindsight's 2020. And had we really been through, just like we take a driving test or we have to take a driving school, why isn't that a part of our education so that we can recognize those signs, so that we can say to someone, hey, I really see, and I'm starting to see some things where I'm concerned and I love you and I want to help you. Let's find a way to help you. So that was another part of it. After Katie died, having all of these conversations with people that were, why didn't we see the signs? Why didn't we recognize this? And that's something that needs to change. We need to be comfortable in talking about it. We need to know what the signs are, and we need to know how we can reach out to get help.
You know, Connie,
Exactly.
I've been around it, and I think the biggest thing is that people are afraid to talk about it because they're afraid they're going to be made fun of or scolded or punished.
Mhm.
And so, you know, you'll
Well, look
see
what's happening right now with Simone Biles, right?
Yes.
She is taking her mental health first. If we really were to break down what she's doing tricks that are so advanced, she could literally kill herself with a snap of a neck. But yet we're making fun of her or making comments to her about her mental health. And then you take it even further back. I remember when Mary Lou Retton was there and Carrie Struggs she pushed through and ran with a broken ankle. Okay, was that really the best that we could do? Like, is that where we want to be? I agree with you 100%. The stigma of mental health needs to change, and it needs to change in things like first responders, military. It's okay to not be okay. We need to, just like if you would have a broken leg or a sprained ankle, you're going to go to the doctor and get help. Your mental health should be just as important and cared for the same way you would care for that diabetes diagnosis or your broken leg.
right.
Boy, that's beautifully said, and I love that you brought up Simone Biles because to see people jump out with an opinion about her, when as if they have
Yeah, they
deep
can't even get off the
personal
couch.
Right.
They can't even get off the couch. And they're,
Thank you. That's what I'm saying. You can't even do a somersault,
Yeah,
and you're
Right.
complaining that this young girl, who is the most decorated gymnast in all of the history of gymnastics.
Yeah.
Literally, there was also talk like, oh, well, we can't judge her. Her tricks are too big. Would we say that to Michael Jordan? No, we wouldn't.
never. So
Never.
yes,
So
I love that
I,
you said that.
but that response from all of us, I think it was good to see people responding and saying, hey, wait a minute, her mental health is just as important as the broken leg. And that's how we need to start responding to that. I did want to make mention that after the day that we went out shooting with Jake and Mike, there was a friend of theirs that was with them that's also part of Walk the Talk America. And he's a firefighter. And we were coming back, him and I were together in the crawler coming back from shooting. And he was saying to me, I think this is really brave what you did. And I just think that in the position that you're in, this was a really amazing thing. And he's looking straight ahead and he says, I remember my first suicide call. And he tells me that he had to take down a 12-year-old girl and try to resuscitate her. And I'm watching him driving back, and I'm thinking to myself, we also need to care for our caregivers.
Amen.
He has been traumatized by what he has just seen, what he has witnessed. he says, now I'm married and I have kids. And every day I think about that.
Mhm.
That is no different than a military person suffering PTSD from a war,
Mhm.
something that happened to them in combat. That's where my other work with a company called Brain Health Restoration, they're providing MERT brain therapy for those who suffer with PTSD and addiction, sleep disorders. But this, I believe, would have been an option for Katie. She suffered PTSD. She grew up in a traumatic
Mhm.
environment, and this was the
Mhm.
beginning of her life. And I would like to see, because that is what kept my husband and I up at night, those first responders, my military son-in-law, Marine, standing outside, holding his 3 babies, waiting for those first responders. That is traumatizing to them. What are we doing to provide better care and better resources and every option on the table for our first responders and military personnel who are doing what they're doing every day to keep us safe and care for us? We're not doing enough for them.
We're not. And, so often, again, going to the Simone Biles and going to what you're talking about, our first responders, we have this, walk it off attitude. Well, some things you can walk off, and other things
It just
truly,
varies. It stays there
yeah,
forever. You know, you
Mhm.
can't.
truly need to be addressed. And there should be no label of weakness or no
No.
shame involved. And
Right.
then going back to Jake and, that I don't have a bat phone. Well, those of us who are, firearms owners, we do fear the bat phone in the form of these red flag laws. We
Mhm.
are afraid that somebody with the best of intentions might think they're helping, call some authority, and the authority thinks the thing to do is to come and confiscate all of the firearms. Well, i- without some due process, that's not the thing to do, and that's going to keep more of us locked up and afraid to speak out and
Plus, it's not
speak
going
up.
to solve the goal either because the
No.
person's still going to do what they're going to do.
Right.
Absolutely. And I 100% agree with you that that is exactly what kept coming to mind is we've got to make sure that gun owners, and that means really finding what your regulations are in each state. That's another confusing part of this is each state has a different kind of set of laws and how they could do this. Like I remember Jake saying to me, and I can't remember the state, that it's not like you can call Uncle Fred and set up to have Uncle Fred come get your weapons if you
Right.
have guns. They that's illegal. So then
Right.
now what do you do? Like what is and so that to me really got me thinking, well, oh my gosh, what can people do if you want to make sure that there's something in place? Is it just that you tell your significant other or you have a special code on the safe? What is it? You really have to dig into each state's laws. So that was what was another part of this that was intriguing to me, and preventing those that have a gun from getting the mental help that they need because they don't understand what's going to happen to them or they are fearful that that right is going to be taken away.
It's so true. And I think that it just may end up being as individual as each person about what is the best route to take for them. There is, oh my gosh, Sarah Albright, what is her Hold My Guns? She has an organization called Hold My Guns that she's starting to work with ranges and gun stores. Where there's like safe storage. So, I, as an individual, if I'm feeling like, man, I'm going through a really rough patch right now, or maybe my child, I have maybe a teenage child at home or something, and they're, little, I don't know, unstable, and I don't think they have the code to the safe, but maybe they do. I could take that and put my firearms voluntarily in safe storage so that I have access back to them when I'm ready to retrieve them. That is one solution that the Second Amendment community is doing, and then the Walk the Talk America, where they are trying to have therapists better understand gun owners and have gun owners better understand therapists and the process and what therapists really can and can't do as far as robbing you of your rights. um, there are things in play, but there's no simple one size fits all, let's have the federal government do this scenario that I think could serve everybody the best. But it is good to have these conversations because it starts that around people's kitchen tables.
Absolutely. And I think within having those conversations is where you are going to find those solutions, right? I mean, look at what has happened with Jake and Mike and I, right? No one would have suspected, because I was so nervous about, because had been hosting Talk It Out Tuesdays for a while now. We started this during the pandemic, and we had covered every topic. We had spoken with the Nevada Attorney General about Black Lives Matter and our senator about the COVID restrictions. And then now we had this mental health crisis, right? We knew that suicide rates were already on the rise prior to COVID. We here, so the Crisis Support Services of Nevada, the 1-800 number rolls into these locations as well. So they're also a national call center. And it was anxiety, depression, being locked down, the insecurities. And they had an increase of over 200% in calls. And many of the calls that were coming in, I would say of that 200%, half of those were people who'd never felt this before. They'd never experienced anxiety. They'd never had a bout with depression. And when Jake was saying to me again that now you have these people that are gun owners, they're not doing anything wrong. This is their legal right to have a gun, are so afraid to reach out for help. And I just said that's just not right. And
it's not conducive to getting people the help they need.
I just don't know if they really understand too, because it's like when Cheryl went to be a psychologist, I was like, oh, okay, well, all right, well, okay.
Oh, that mumbo jumbo.
And it's just like she convinced me really hard to do a week seminar or whatever they called it. And so I went by myself to a place that
is Ultimate Leadership with the Cloud Townsend organization. And it's basically a weekend of group therapy.
Changed my life. It changed my life in a way that I wish that every person on this earth had to do it. Because if they did and they opened up to it, then their whole life would change. As far as,
I think I just recently here in Northern Nevada, through the Nevada Military Alliance, they put together what was called the Valor Resiliency Training. And it really was addressing the root cause of anxiety, PTSD, depression, and divorce amongst first responders and military personnel. And the two gentlemen that ran the program, they're military, hardcore guys that really were talking about compassionate things, how a first responder, for example, I love the example they used. So the officer has a traumatic experience, right? Maybe he did have a suicide call that he had to go on that day. So he's coming home and he doesn't want to burden his wife with this. He doesn't want to burden the kids with this. So what does he do? Instead, he kind of bottles it all up. He goes into his the man cave, and she's maybe been home all, hey, he's off work, he just finished his 3-day shift. We're going to do all these great things. So he thinks he's doing good for her when really she's upset because he's not communicating. And the way that they talked about the importance of your mental health, and they actually compared it to the Spartans, right? The most intense warriors of all time, that they would come back after fighting and being in these wars, and they would take a pottery class, go on a month-long hike. They would find ways to decompress. Yeah. They would find ways to reset a mental caliber because when you're in war, you're at a heightened peak. So you need to kind of come back and decompress. How can we do that? How can we work that into a culture, both military and police and fire, that the culture is nothing bothers me. I'm tough. I can handle it. I'm made of armor. And what they're saying is you are, but when you come home, let's take that armor off.
Boy, that's so true.
It kind of reminds me of like when we were raised boys don't cry, men don't cry.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it's like, oh, well, maybe they do just inside themselves, and which even makes the problem harder. So, you know, you can still be strong, but you'll still have weaknesses. And I think taking these classes or meeting, talking to somebody besides even your wife sometimes, but talking to somebody else about it can help take away that stress and anxiety that you have, you know.
You know, my husband and I, after we lost Katie, we did go to therapy, and we were going pretty much every week for several months. And then there got to be a point where we said to the therapist, because mind you, we have two other daughters, right? We have now our 25-year-old, and we have an 11-year-old. So we said, we don't want to be sad every day. We want to get back to living our lives. It was almost as if we were asking permission, like, can we get back to our lives? It's not that we're not forgetting Katie. Everything that we do now is in her memory and to bring awareness to what we've gone through. But I remember the therapist saying, you're good people who had a bad thing happen. It's okay if you want to get back to living your life and being there for your kids. My other two daughters don't deserve me to be shattered for the
Yes.
rest of my life and not be able to be there for them. What good would that do? And it's not what Katie would have wanted. So
Right.
that was really, I think, a turning point for us. The therapy helped us for the time that we needed it, because you're very lost in that time. As like,
Yes.
you know, the best way I can describe that, you know, we are part of a club that we don't want anyone to be a part of. This is not a club that people want to be a part of. But I also know that I had to get back to my life. I
Yes.
didn't want to be wallowing in that forever.
Mm, so well said. And while you were talking about the Spartans who came back and then they do something to decompress, and just even saying working, making pottery, it reminded me of one of our previous guests we've had on. His name is Michael Rodriguez, who was Special Forces Green Beret sniper and a medic, deployed 9 times. Um, and he makes knives, and he talks to other people about, there's that process of using your hands. If you're, whether it's gardening, our brother-in-law is, he makes quilts. He makes quilts of honor for other veterans, and he's working through his PTS by working with his hands making quilts. And there really is something to that, that it's connecting your brain and your body in a different way. And I just love that you mentioned that. And I also want to, Dan, if you'll read the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, I'm going to reach behind me and grab the Walk the Talk
The number?
America flyer.
1-800-273-8255.
And I think that's so important. And it's on the back of the Walk the Talk America flyer as well. It's hard to get the camera to pick that up, but it says mental health. It's okay to talk about it.
Yes, it
And
is.
I appreciate that you are helping to bring it forward in all the unique ways that you are. And so, with your advocacy work, which is the suicide prevention, what are you currently doing? And what do you hope that by sharing this story, you will see happen?
I have a lot of things that we're doing right now. Obviously, we want to push forth better mental health resources. As I mentioned, our state, Nevada, is sitting at 50th in the nation. We'd like to see that change. And currently, we're working with, and I'm so happy to say this, although it was a bill put together by Cortez Masto, who is our Democratic senator, we have bipartisan support for a $45 million mental health bill. We
Nice.
really know and recognize that mental health, housing, gun ownership, all of this is coming into play together. And if we can provide better mental health resources, whether it's making affordable places for people to go, I mean, that's a big problem here in Northern Nevada. There are literally, unless you have a lot of money, you're not going to get into a facility.
Yeah.
And I have seen people who have lived here who have to send their children or their family members out of state to get help because we don't have the resources. So I think working to find better ways for funding. And of course, you mentioned my work with crisis support services. We are out with them getting prepped and ready. In 2022, the 988 number will become official. It'll replace the 1-800 number. Which is great because this is a specific and designated line for mental health. We hope that it will be just as valuable as a 911 number. I also, you can find out information about the mental health bill if you want to follow me. I'm at Connie Wray, WRAY. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook. The next stage, our docu-series, we dive a lot into mental health. We look at partnering with other agencies and where are we going, educating the community about the resources that are available. And you can watch that docu-series at youtube.com/the next stage. And then my work with brain health restoration, you can find them at brainhealthrestoration.com. Really finding alternative resources. Another big thing that we didn't really dive into this with my daughter was that she was on all kinds of pharmaceuticals, on again, off again.
Mm-hmm.
We need better choices in our mental health care. We need to say if medication is not working, if something like brain health restoration with their MERT brain therapy and FDA approved technology is available, we should have the right to choose what we want for our health care. And this technology should be readily available to first responders, military personnel. This technology has been embedded with the special ops for a very long time. It's not new technology, but I want us to look at other alternatives. I'm not saying that pharmaceuticals are bad. They absolutely help those individuals. I've seen it work. I have family members that have struggled with other mental health issues, and I'm not saying that it doesn't work, but I'm also saying if you've tried everything and you feel as though there is nothing else out there, shouldn't we have all the options available to us?
Right.
Exactly. And that is the thing. There's got to be more than just, well, here's another pill, and here's
Yes.
one to lift you up, and here's one to bring
Mhm.
you down. And just a life stealing cycle for some people. Others, it's a life giving pathway.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just want other resources available. I think
I
that
agree.
if you are in charge of what you want for
Mhm.
your healthcare, instead of being locked in because this is what they say
Yes.
is going to be right for you, you know, and we know that with our daughter, she had told her husband on the Wednesday before she took her life on that Friday, she was on some meds that she did not like. And her husband, she wasn't feeling well on them. And he said to her, well, why don't you stop taking those meds? Your doctor's appointment is on Monday. And she
Oh,
took her life on a Friday. Now, I'm not saying that that is why that happened, but
right.
it definitely has us thinking as we look at toxology reports,
Yeah.
there was a lot in her system.
Yeah. And if she was tried to quit something cold turkey,
Mhm.
that can just create havoc. That's wow. Well, Miss Connie Ray, thank you so much for all that you have brought to this conversation, for sharing this deeply personal journey with us, and for the work that you're doing to help empower other families and help them after the fact, after they've been through a tragedy, and also helping them to prevent a future tragedy. That is so amazing. Thank you so much for all of that.
Well, thank you, and I greatly appreciate you helping us get the word out. And I'm happy that with your following, we now have an opportunity to start a conversation. If you are a gun owner and you're struggling, we want you to be able to get the help that you need. We don't want to take your guns. We care about your mental health, and we want to make sure that every resource is available to you so that you can be safe. And there are resources that are out there. You know, the crisis support services line is absolutely 24/7 available to anyone. And I do want to stress this about that. Don't be judgmental about what your crisis is. What a
Yes.
crisis is to me may not be a crisis to you, but it doesn't mean it isn't a crisis. So I want people to use that line as a resource and know that there is help and there is hope. And I'm just so appreciative that you're willing to have this conversation.
And right back at you. Thank you again so much. Give us one more time your website so people can follow you directly, and then from there find all the other things you're involved in.
Yeah, you can find me at connieray.com, and that's Connie, ConnieWray. You can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and our Next Stage channel is on YouTube at youtube.com/the next stage.
Fantastic. Thank you again
Thanks, Connie.
so much. God
Thank
bless.
you.
We'll check back in with you from time to
Yes.
time, see how things are going.
Thank you both so very much.
Bye-bye.
Absolutely. Bye-bye now. And the next time we're going to Tahoe, pop in and see her, right?
Tomorrow?
Oh, if only.
There is a problem about Tahoe, though.
What is that? That it snows sometimes?
Close to California.
Well, it is, half of it's in
I
California.
know.
So, but we love California.
Yes, we do.
We just hate the politics. But what are you gonna do?
What a show. It's hard. It's hard to think about what she went through.
Mm.
And, it's hard to think about what people are going through right now. And, talking about having Mike at the gun show with his walk the talk.
Mhm.
I mean, people have got to get past the fear of having medical people trying to help with the situation. And I mean,
Well, the politicians are not helping.
I know
with
they're not.
that.
No, they want to take our guns away. Oh, you stubbed your toe? Well, you need to get rid of your guns because you might be having too much pain.
And that is something that when we had Michael Sodini on last time, I wish I had that episode number to tell you, but just search his name on our website, gunfreedomradio.com. He was able to express that to some of the political
Mhm.
people that they were getting ready to push this bill, this particular bill, and it would have added to the stigma of gun owners and mental health issue. And he was able to say to them, do you realize what you're doing? Because you're saying you're for mental health, and yet what you're actually doing is going to hamper that because you've got this hook there connected to firearms and red flag laws. And it truly made a positive impact on the direction that this particular politician was going with this particular bill. So it's important to have these conversations and to speak up and to help draw those lines for people who are just like, they've got tunnel vision. They're like, I'm a politician. Maybe I have the big, Democrat D on my chest and I am supposed to hate guns. Well, there's all these unintended consequences that go along with that. And we need to expand for them from our own personal experiences and knowledge, like Michael Sodini did, ways that they could look at this differently. And anyway,
And maybe really strong on talking with your family, especially teenage kids.
Mhm.
We can say, oh man, COVID, I'm locked in my house for a year. I got to wear a mask. They're telling me that I got to get vaccinations for work. It's my only job. I don't want to get vaccinated. All these things that we're going through. And, we need to take time to listen to the kids
Mhm.
because they're having issues too. And I think that's the biggest problem is that we don't really listen to our kids,
Mm.
you know, to try to find out if there's something hidden that's going on inside of them that needs help.
Well, and
And
how do we
and wait,
listen to them when they're locked on a video game,
right.
right? Or we're locked
Well, they're
on
locked on
our
a video.
phones.
Maybe they're locked on a video game to get away from everything else. Maybe that's their knife making. Maybe that's their pottery making. But
You
the
gotta have that
main thing,
balance.
the thing is that I remember as a kid being afraid to talk to my parents about things.
Mhm. I know, like fill in the blanks.
Should I be
It's
afraid?
like, I'm afraid to talk about fill
Right.
in the blanks.
Now I know that I shouldn't have been afraid to talk to them about anything I wanted to talk about
Yeah.
because they were my parents who loved me.
Yeah.
unbelievable, but yeah. But what I'm thinking is, so how do we teach our kids not to be afraid to talk to us
Yeah.
about anything?
Well, and that's another episode. But for now, we have got to sign off. Thank you so much to our awesome guest,
I'm
Connie
afraid to tell you,
Wray.
no, we're not done yet.
And we're not done yet. Well, we
Oh,
have to
time
be
says
done yet
no.
because the clock tells us we have to be.
Okay.
And thank you to our awesome guest, Connie Wray,
Yeah, she
all
was
that you're doing, opening yourself to sharing that journey with us. Wow. Thank you. Thank you to our amazing listeners all over the globe.
Can I say thank you to Mike and Jake too? Because
Absolutely.
it's like, what if they were impatient?
Mm.
What if they just
Or
wanted
not
to move to
tuned
the next
in.
thing? It didn't take the time
Yeah.
to work with her, with
Yeah.
Connie. Where would she be now?
Yeah.
And where would they be? So thank you guys. Walk the Talk
Absolutely.
America.
Absolutely.
And
WTTA. All right. And until next time, please pray for this nation. Pray for the people who are in leadership positions that they will have an open mind to hear you and to understand that, they might be thinking about one thing a bill doing and it's really doing something quite different. And there's a bunch of them that maybe we don't like that much, but
I could give you a list.
we're going to pray for them too.
Yes.
Maybe especially pray for them. All right. Until next time, be good to each other. Have a great week. And God bless.
God bless. Bye-bye.